about everything from the world of public procurement.
Dear listeners, welcome to another episode of Public Procurement Office podcast. Today, we are talking with our distinguished guest from Canada, Professor Christopher Bovis. My name is Petra Šupáková. Mr. Professor, could you please introduce yourself and tell us what is your expertise in public procurement?
Thank you, Petra. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm Chris Bovis, Professor of International and European Business Law at the University of Hull and many other universities in Canada and in the European Union. I specialize in procurement, public-private partnerships, state aid, competition, transport, and business aspects of the European Union law.
We know you live in England. So what are main differences between procurement processes in Canada and England? Could you compare?
You can compare because both countries are outside the European Union. Both the UK and Canada are not bound by the European Union directives on public procurement. However, they're bound by specific arrangements of the World Trade Organization government procurement agreement that specializes into allowing access to the markets in reciprocal sectors in UK and also in Canada.
England used to be part of European Union, and back then they were following the regulations. Is it really that different now that they're outside of the EU?
United Kingdom just introduced a new law in February 2025, the Procurement Act 2023. It took the best part of 5 years to get it into some degree of conformity with acceptable standards. It's mirroring the European directives on a number of issues. Number one, it's following the procurement directives on selection and qualification, including exclusion of tenders, and also has very similar award procedures and award criteria for public contracts.
Comparing to European directives.
Yes.
Are you following the new set of the regulations that are now preparing on the European level?
Yes.
Then what do you think about that?
They have a big mountain to climb. The European Union wants to revolutionize public procurement, review the directives for public sector, utilities, concessions, defense, and also the remedies directive in a way that is more simplified, is modernized, and allows more access to public procurement markets at national level, giving more authority to national governments, national contracting authorities to award contracts the way they see fit.
And you consider this to be the right direction we are heading at?
That's the only direction. There's not the right or wrong direction. There's only one direction because procurement is very similar. Procurement principles, procurement also organization of the directives is very similar since the beginning of the whole regulatory interface in the 70s. Very similar for the principles, very similar for the objectivity principle and the transparency principle. What we need is transformation in modernization, introduction of technology, including artificial intelligence, and allowing contracting authorities at member states more authority, more autonomy to award contracts the way they see fit.
If you would compare procuring in Canada or in England, where do you see the processes are more simple?
The European Union is the simplest because the European directives have perfected the entire acquisition of works, supplies, and services since the 70s. They have a long-standing experience of 50 years to perfect selection and qualification, award procedures, award criteria, and also review procedures at member states. So you need to take into account a huge amount of expertise that member states have, but also the maturity of the system exists in such a way that the European Union has one of the best legal systems to export outside the internal market. Procurement directives are the best systems to plug and play, export to other jurisdictions, other legal systems, such as Canada, such as United States of America, Australia, or China.
This is a very interesting opinion because, as you know, there is this narrative that actually European Union directives bring us really huge bureaucracy. So why do you think there is this narrative when you are comparing to another states and you actually tell us that European Union's directives are the best?
We need bureaucracy, Petra. You cannot have awarding of 20% of your GDP collectively within the European Union without bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is good to the point that serves accountability, objectivity, and some degree of transparency. We play with people's money. It's taxpayers' money. It's people's savings that go into the delivery of public services. You need to have proper procedures, proper systems, perhaps bureaucratic sometimes, in order to allow the whole principles, objectivity, transparency, and also issues that relate into access to justice met at all times. It could be a big problem for some member states that they want automation and immediate award of public contracts, but a lot of people, a lot of end users, a lot of civic users of public services, you and I, would like to see a system that purports the clarity and the objectivity and accountability of public service delivery.
Talking about internal market and EU regulations, what was achieved and what more could have been achieved?
Well, for the European procurement directives, the European Commission created one of the best systems to codify administrative practice. They brought together supplies, works, and services into one legal instrument, the Public Sector Directive, replicating exactly the same principles and objectivity characteristics into the Utilities Directive, and, the most important thing, try to export that into different sectors, such as concessions, public-private partnerships, and now defense. Defense Omnibus is the new priority of the European Union to club forces together with member states in order to allow to tap into European funds for defense equipment.
So what do you think what more could have been achieved? Do you still see some room for improvement or some new ideas that could be put into directives?
The room for improvement, Petra, is mainly allowing a new system to embrace technology. I repeat many times, everywhere I go, there's a new kid on the block, and that is artificial intelligence. It's a platform, it's a software that will revolutionize the delivery of public procurement objectives, but also the delivery of public administration. Artificial intelligence will create a very seamless way to allow contracting authorities to move away from mundane tasks and create a system that is very concrete and very stable in order to create the ability to perform in the delivery of public service and the award of public contracts.
AI is a really big topic. So, for example, in England, do you have some working group of experts who are actually preparing some kind of new regulations or legislation on how to work with this AI and the future that it brings? Because we know it's still evolving, so it's very hard to actually know what to expect.
Yes, indeed, Petra. There is a huge priority on the part of the European Commission to allow ethics to play a big role in the use of artificial intelligence. Quite often, the artificial intelligence platform, the software, hallucinates and doesn't create accurate answers. Therefore, you need to hone and you need to perfect the artificial intelligence in a way that it suits the government, suits the contracting authority, in order to allow it to, for example, rule out any corruption or any bribery or any issues that relate into anti-competitive behavior of specific players in the market. It's still in the game, it's still in the early times of the game, because the European Commission and also some member states, they have to get together and agree the platform, they agree the parameters of the platform of use or artificial intelligence, create something that everybody accepts, everybody agrees to that, and the most important thing, agree the price, because artificial intelligence platform and software are quite expensive, and you need to have a convergence of price, something that it will help the contracting authority, but also it will be creating a very competitive advantage for the sectors, for the markets, to supply this software to the contracting authorities of the member states.
I'm really interested. What do you think? Let's do some practical example. What AI could really bring in the processes?
Artificial intelligence in the process can bring the following. The contracting authority can upload all the submissions into the AI platform from the contractors for a given contract and ask the artificial intelligence platform to identify any risk that relates into the delivery methodology of each individual contractors. And therefore, by allowing the platform, the machine, for example, to go deep into the selection process of every individual contractor, the contracting authority will have on a dashboard a complete objective way of looking at how risk could be managed, could be transferred, ascertained for the delivery of programs. This is one scenario. Another scenario is that the contracting authority will still upload everything onto the platform, the artificial intelligence, and ask the machine to find out any potential collusion patterns between the contractors and the suppliers and the subcontractors, to find ways, patterns, which means correlation, some sort of very fancy and extremely sophisticated way of statistical information, to find anything that correctly creates that concept of collusion behind the scenes and creates a process of integrity question mark for the procurement process. Finally, artificial intelligence can be used on one very important thing. It can evaluate the tenders. It can move the human person away from the tender and allow the machine to evaluate the tender on its own. Of course, the human person will be on the background and will have control at any given time to go into the evaluation process and see if the methodology for scoring is correct. If you put too many score points into one scenario versus the other. Therefore, you have then sort of automation, objectivity, and at the same time, full control of the human behind the scenes.
This is really interesting. And this needs a lot of data.
It needs data. It needs also collaboration between authorities because most of the artificial intelligence are data hungry. And I mean that with a bit of a humor approach there because the platform, the machine, will need to scan the entire web for any pattern based on data, based on previous information on the web. If it's not on the web, they cannot use it. But generative artificial intelligence, it's a new format there. That's something that it will be revolutionize also the way of looking at AI in the future. Generative artificial intelligence think on their own. They don't need data. They make data, which is quite dangerous because that's what we call many times the artificial intelligence machine hallucinates. Quite often they make cases. They use artificial intelligence in courts. They use it to supply to the court arguments to win a case. But quite often the argument is fake because it has the wrong cases. It doesn't have real cases. It makes cases out of the blue and creates a very dangerous system. That's the generative artificial intelligence. It needs serious regulation. It needs some serious thought how you use something that doesn't need data but thinks on its own by using whatever it can get.
These examples already happened. What you just mentioned, that they are using AI, which is fake on the courts.
Yes.
Wow, this is for the first time I hear this because this really seems dangerous.
Yes, it has. In the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, they have real examples of hallucination of artificial intelligence. And the courts lawyers warn the legal environment, do not use artificial intelligence to submit legal documents because accuracy and correctness, it's not 100% guaranteed. I mention again, Petra, the artificial intelligence can hallucinate, can think out of its own and create a very bad scenario that will lead the judge or anybody to the wrong conclusion.
These are real challenges we are facing, actually, in the present and in the future.
This is what you mentioned, that we need to collectively work that big idea of artificial intelligence. It's not that it's new, it's here. Artificial intelligence is here. At least 5 years ago, every contracting authority thought how they can use artificial intelligence for their own purposes in a way that could be beneficial for the authority. They can save money, they can save time, but also they can create a more concrete decisions. But if you arrive at the wrong decision, if you arrive at something which is opening the Pandora's box for further litigations, it's a fake economy. Imagine if you assess a tender based on the wrong criteria and you end up in the court for the next decade, you have nothing more than paying fines and paying damages. So it defies the purpose that you use a machine or you use technology to help, but eventually the technology will hurt.
Did electronization of the public procurement processes bring higher interest in the tenders, or is this process still in the beginning?
It's still in the beginning. The electronization, or the sort of electric procurement, if I use that terminology, it's something infant. It's a baby at the moment. It creates a good appetite for contracting authorities to move into something that they might use for the future. They might have recourse to allow the machine to help them to award the contract or to manage the contract. However, this is the big one. How the market will react, how the contractor will react, how the supplier will react into that. There's one element. The contracting authority, the public sector, is the one part of the story. The other part of the story is the market. That means the contractor, it's the companies, in other words, that will participate in public procurement. There's I wouldn't say disbelief, but there is a suspicion at the moment that they don't have faith into the artificial intelligence. They don't believe it's going to work for their benefit because they will use as much as possible artificial intelligence to supply, for example, an answer about environmental credentials or socioeconomic credentials of the company vis-a-vis employment of women in the organization. They can write nice essays, they can write a nice answer to the contracting authority, but after that, the contractor, the private sector, doesn't have much hope or much anticipation that the artificial intelligence will be used for something else, which is evaluation of the answers that they made, provided to the contracting authority, or even more, managing the contract if they're lucky to win the contract.
How do you think can European Union compete with such a huge markets as USA or China?
Very well. I think the European Union is one of the biggest markets. It represents 2 trillion euro a year, 1 trillion euro above thresholds, and the other trillion is below thresholds of specific public contracts. Procurement reflects up to 20% of the GDP of every member state. It's serious. It's serious investment, serious money, 3 times, 4 times more than defense sector. Imagine on that there. For supplies, works and services in the public sector, in the utilities, and also in the concession sector. In other parts of the world, in Canada, in the United States, in China, the market is equally big, but the market is closed. The market is creating a very close environment. You cannot penetrate. You cannot get into the Chinese market. The European Commission ordered many times the Chinese companies to stop subsidizing medical equipment that is destined for the European Union because they're dumping the product, they're selling the product below cost with a view to drive European competitors out of the market. You could see also the parameters concerning the different parts of the world in terms of accessing to the market of procurement. In China, the market is closed, very closed. The reciprocal market in procurement vis-a-vis European procurement and Chinese procurement is cheese and chalk. You cannot compare that. If the European Union is as much as open, let's say up to 80% and 90% open for all sectors, the Chinese procurement is probably less than 5% open. because you will not have access to the Chinese markets from Slovakia, from Czechia, from any part of the European Union, or from Canada to go to China to sell products and services and to the national market. Japan is the same. Japan is precious about their own trains. They have a specific system concerning standardization for trains, so they won't allow any specialized equipment for trains and transport equipment to penetrate the country and the public procurement. So, by definition, Japan is a very closed market. US is similar. US is very closed market and very protected market for a number of issues concerning infrastructure, national infrastructure, airports, ports, and quite often motorways are often given to domestic suppliers for completion.
This is very interesting. So what could European Union do?
They started with foreign subsidy regulation and international procurement instrument, the IPI and the FSR, foreign subsidy regulation. They try to prioritize procurement for Europeans. Not preference, but priority. It's a difference here. The European Union will give preference to jobs, to companies in Europe, priority for completion of contracts and completion of projects. Also, the European Union will give a huge boost, a huge push into the member states for two important concepts. One is the protection of the environment. The protection of the environment in procurement is legitimate award criteria. Contracting authorities can award a contract based on the protection of the environment. It's part of the subject matter of any contract if you have a net zero policy or environmental protection. You don't have that in any part of the world, in Canada, in the United States, or in China. And the second, the most important thing I want to mention you, Petra, is that the European Union will bring collectively all member states, everybody together for that concept that in the past we played about, will never be serious. And that is the joint procurement. You create a procurement mechanisms that allow member states such as Slovak Republic, Czechia, Hungary, Austria, for example, to club forces together and buy, for example, vaccines or buy energy together. So you bring the price down by volume purchasing, by creating muscle in the marketplace. You create an opportunity to go longer in public procurement by allowing that entry into the market by multiple effects, by joint procurement of different countries.
I would also like to ask about the jurisdiction that is now coming from European Union. So, for example, we have calling or Qingdao, and we now know that actually these are giving responsibilities to the contracting authority and not to the member states. And imagine in Slovakia, for example, we have 3,000 municipalities with very small number of people living in one village or town. How do you feel about that, and how should we kind of resolve this?
It's very simple, Petra. The court, in both Colin and Qingdao, and in the non-paper by the European Commission, which repeats the judgments of Colin and Qingdao, it's a non-paper, it's a kind of a document that summarizes the outcome of the case. The court puts the hotspot, the spotlight onto the contracting authority, not the member state, the contracting authority. The small municipality, the small mayor, somewhere outside the periphery of your capital cities, away from the actual center of the action of public procurement. Is that good or is that bad? I think the idea is that you get more power. You get more power. They can allow or disallow. It doesn't say anything. The contracting authority has the opportunity to either accept third country parties into public procurement from organizations that do not have signed an agreement with the European Union. Therefore, they're not part of the World Trade Organization as yet, and creates a system that brings that sort of reciprocity between the member state and the other third country into access to the market. Would that create a problem for the contracting authority, the small contracting authority? Possibly yes, because because the mayor outside the periphery, north, for example, of Slovakia, the last thing they want to do is start reading case law or start reading, understanding what Kindago or what Colin is. He wants something quick, something complete, something solid in order to deliver public services. The last thing you want to do is analysis of extraterritorial jurisdiction of public procurement. That's the only disadvantage. The real concept, it's pretty simple. The default criteria, Petra, for any member state I'll visit is tell your mayors, tell the contracting authorities to allow specifically, explicitly, participation in public procurement from third countries. Therefore, you don't have any issue to exclude, any justification to exclude somebody from public procurement, which will bring more litigations in the future. Everybody on the table in order to participate in public procurement. That's the easiest, that's the cleanest way that you can see forward for that situations we have.
Perfect. Thank you for this recommendation. Past 2 days, you are leading the lectures for many participants from procurement world, not only from Slovakia, but we had Czech Republic, Austria, Hungary here. What were their main concerns regarding public procurement, and how did you find the event?
Event was fantastic, well organized. It went like a clock. It was superbly hospitable, and the participants participate in a way that they engage with me and other speakers in a way that they justify their high level of knowledge. You have a lot of expertise around here in Bratislava and also other countries in Slovakia and also in the Czech Republic. Huge expertise from years of amassing the know-how of using procurement and accessing public procurement. What I really liked because of the event, the Congress, is that the participants use that as a benefit in order to help them for deciding cases and help them in their real job on a daily basis. In other words, I gave them example in case law and cases and justifications of where a specific argument would lead if you go that way in order to justify either assurance, either the audit, or either the control of public procurement. Finally, the most important thing that it was left to me with a very, very pleasant environment in the Congress of Procurement in Slovakia is, apart from the hospitality, is the ability to use the university. The university was superbly hospitable, and the deans, they came and they supported the event, and priority for academia in Slovakia at the moment, believe it or not, is public services, including public procurement. So I'll be coming back pretty soon in September for a major pan-European conference on the internal market and digitalization.
Well, we are very much looking forward to have you here. Do you have some last comments you would like to share with our listeners?
Be strong and create something that will last. That means that create a new system on procurement for reform, for anything that relates into the internal market that will last for more than a decade. Long-lasting reforms is the important thing. Be strong, it's important because Slovaks are strong people, also Czechs are strong people. They have intellectual strength, intellectual generosity, but also they're very strong in terms of arguments. The best arguments, you will see that in the court. It's open documents, Petra. You take a court documents and you see the arguments submitted by Slovaks or Czechs there. Different quality, different depth, a different puncture of the entire process. This is unique. As a lawyer, as an academic, it's just a pleasure to see the submission of the Slovak government into any decision from competition to procurement to transport and to any business of mergers and acquisitions. So be strong and be collective.
Thank you, Mr. Professor, for this amazing interview. It was such a pleasure to have you here.
You're very welcome.
Dear listeners, you are listening to another episode of the podcast of the Public Procurement Office. My name is Petra Šupakova and I'm looking forward to another episode.
Podcast of the PPO. Podcast about everything from the world of public procurement.